Thank you and welcome everyone. So today I'm going to be talking about setting analytics units from scratch. So here's a quick background. I've spent time across multiple verticals and I've set up analytics units in different countries. So what I'm planning to do is I'll try and extract some of those learnings and see if I can talk about how do you set up analytics units from scratch. I have a few case studies, and what I've done is I've seen increasingly there are common patterns that one can look at. So the common patterns that one can look at have been distilled into 10 points for you. Here's point one. The first thing that you'd want to do when you're setting up an analytics unit is take a holiday. What I mean to say is try and figure out what is the big picture. The big picture is where you relax and look out at the horizon and figure out what is it that you want to do. If you want to look at what exactly is analytics, analytics comes up with 3 different disciplines that have to merge together. You have statistics, software tools, and underlining all of that is business acumen. You need the business acumen because you need to fundamentally solve problems across multiple domains. Earlier, this particular slide would be saying solve business problems, but now it's turned out that problems exist in different places. Today, we are in the midst of an unprecedented crisis, the coronavirus crisis, and we know that there are problems that we need to tackle. The social services sector is one of those sectors that has to tackle situations in analytics. And in order to do that, they're not really organized into one clear analytics unit. So if they have to, for example, build an analytics unit, how would they do that? So the first thing that any analytics unit will want to start off is with vision. In fact, there are 6 things, and those 6 things up on the slide are the ones that we believe at ISS are important for your analytics vision. So you need to have analytics vision, you need to have a cultural mindset, analytics talent, data strategy, information architecture, and data governance should underline all of that. And let me just talk about vision for a bit. When you're talking about vision, you could start off with knowing and monitoring, which is level 1 in your vision, knowing and monitoring trends and knowing and monitoring what's happening within your organization. But you can really up the ante if you move all the way to level 5, where what you're doing is transforming your business model. You could work at multiple levels of each of these particular 1 to 5 points, but transforming your business model would be how you look at vision. And there are multiple examples that one can talk about. But before you get into that vision, there's number 2, which is you need to figure out that there is an ROI for any of the things that you're going for. You don't want to use a cannon to shoot a fly, do you? So my colleague Sharon had just alluded to an example recently where she was talking about how machines have started helping and beating grandmasters in chess. So that brings an example to me in mind, which is the best of chess proponents today are not the grandmasters, are not the softwares. It's actually a combination of the two. In fact, you could have a not so great software and a not so great chess player who is a good programmer to come together and you could get a much better result. Similarly, what you want to look at is your analytics cost and your infrastructure cost. Is that really delivering ROI for you? Is that really delivering business benefit for you? What you want is not sophisticated analytics. What you want sometimes is just simple and basic analytics, which delivers business benefit for you. And what kind of business benefit? The kind of business benefit that you want to look for are fundamentally around use cases. Let me talk about a few use cases across the spectrum. Here are some across some industries. banking and telecom have always been the #1 and #2 industries in analytics, fundamentally because they've got a lot of analytics data, customer related data, in a relatively clean format. Retail has much more data, but retail has dirty data. I'll come to retail in a minute. Let me begin with banking. There are multiple use cases one can talk about in banking. If you look at the number of use cases within banking itself, there could be a few thousands. I've just picked up one for you. Let's talk about anti-money laundering. Money laundering is a sophisticated crime. The money launderers have their own textbooks. They look at techniques such as under-invoicing, over-invoicing, layering, undershipment, overshipment, and so on. And if you have to catch sophisticated criminals who have these kind of techniques, you need sophisticated techniques yourselves. Today, graph theory is being used to figure out what are the patterns amongst the transactions. And anti-money laundering is becoming an increasingly important use case for banks. Telecom has been obsessed with churn prevention for quite some time. The term churn means anybody who's moving from one service to another service would have churned from service A to service B. The same keyword within banking is attrition. So churn prevention is something that attracts quite a number of analysis within the telecom space. Let's move on to retail. You must have heard of the Netflix prize. Netflix, for those of you who haven't, let me give you a quick 101 on Netflix prize. Netflix had recently, as in a few years ago, organized a prize and then put it up on the internet. They said that they had a recommender system which recommended newer titles and newer content to their users. And anybody who could provide more than a 10% improvement in that recommendation engine was eligible for a prize which was $1 million. That's interesting. So does that mean we don't need analytics teams anymore? All we need is just identify such a prize and put it up on the internet and let people solve these problems? I see a lot of companies doing that. But the difficult part is identifying the problem and saying that a 10% improvement actually leads to $1 million or more in ROI. So as long as you can get that worked out, that is the most difficult part. So retail is going for a lot of recommender systems. Healthcare has always been looking at drug discovery. When you're talking about drug discovery, one of the latest examples that researchers in MIT have come up with is they've looked at the latest antibiotic that has been discovered using machine learning techniques. They've actually looked at molecules and different chemical and physical parameters of molecules. Using that, they've identified which candidate molecules could be good for curing certain kinds of diseases. That's interesting. Suddenly, mathematics has started saving lives. I can go to my grandma tomorrow and say, hey, grandma, it's not that I'm doing ROI analysis for a bank, but I'm actually curing cancer using math. Manufacturing has always been looking at a lot of mathematics, and today they've started looking at process improvement in a big way. When you're looking at process improvement, you're looking at each process as a statistically different, discrete event. And the minute you start doing that, there could be so many variables you can cater to. You can look at the effect of humidity in the air, certain small little specks of dust that have come in and made a difference in the microconductor process. Those kind of elements would help looking at the assembly process and see how you can improve that. Let's talk about airlines. Airlines and hospitality are industries that in today's world are undergoing quite a bit of interesting times. But they've been obsessed about yield management, and I would guess they should get even more obsessed as you go along, because they have to look at how do you look at revenue management, how do you look at pricing, depending on the amount of time, depending on the amount of demand that's coming in, and working out different kinds of pricing could be very interesting from a profitability perspective. Now, when you start building these kind of analytics decisions for a company, you do have profit at the back of your mind. But when you start thinking about the social services sector, it is a little difficult to figure out what exactly is the ROI. How do you look at profit and how do you look at numbers of that kind? The key is to start small. So let me look at this particular view of analytics. This is a slide from Gartner, which is a bit of a dated slide, but I quite like this because this was the one that established quite a number of key terms within analytics. In fact, this became industry-specific jargon: descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive. So when you look at this, there is a certain progression that they are suggesting. In the progression, if you want to start small, you want to start with descriptive analytics. I would like to think of descriptive analytics as baby analytics. Take a small step. Ask what happened. Look at small little questions that you can answer. Think of yourself as Sherlock Holmes, who's come into a room and has seen a particular murder out there. And the first thing that Sherlock Holmes would probably do would be to look at the clues, to find out what has happened. Okay, there is a window and the window is broken. There is a corpse on the floor and there are shattered pieces of glass on the floor. These are facts. Identify the facts and take notes. What happened? And then you take the next step, which is diagnostic analysis, which is where Sherlock would possibly connect the dots. Okay, so if there were shattered pieces of glass, maybe there was a cat that came in through the window. Maybe the cat was responsible for the pieces of glass. You're connecting the dots. When you're connecting the dots, what you're doing is you're necessarily looking at event A in a point in time and event B in a point in time that happened a little before event A and connecting them. If the MRT got delayed by 10 minutes, why did that happen? MRT got delayed event A, event B, maybe there was a change in software. And that change in software possibly led to this particular delay of 10 minutes in the MRT. Now, once you do that, then you graduate to predictive analytics. When you're talking about predictive analytics, you're talking about the future. You're talking about what will happen. What is going to be the future of your industry? What are going to be the trends? And that's fascinating. And that's fundamentally the reason why there is so much hype about analytics. Just imagine, if you can predict what is going to happen in your industry, won't you give your right arm for it? So predictive analytics is when you're crossing the boundary from the past to going into the future. And once you do that, that's not enough. This is where a lot of data scientists stop. A lot of data scientists stop with predictive analytics, stop with the insights, and stop with a PowerPoint presentation. What you want to do is you want to go further. You want to say, okay, so here are the insights, but how do you take these insights and make things happen? How do you take an insight and convert it to an action? Yes, you can predict that a new sector, say the Yangon to Kathmandu sector, is suddenly opening up because Myanmar has suddenly opened up. But by how much? And how much is the demand? If you know the demand, then you can accurately predict, okay, given this kind of demand, maybe I can charge this kind of pricing, or I need to go for a code share. So there is some more analysis or some more action that you need to do in order to get into prescriptive analytics. So if you have to do that, think of it as progressions, think of it as step by step. What I would recommend for any organization is start with baby analytics. Start with descriptive analytics, then move on to diagnostic, and then start going to the other esoteric forms. Don't jump straight into predictive analytics. Don't jump straight into diagnostic analysis. And make sure that whatever you do, you cap it off or round it off with prescriptive analytics. So number 1 and number 4 in some sense are compulsory. The other two are optional. Sometimes what happens is that you might find that you don't have data. You have very little data. So what do? That's a common issue. Step one, try getting data with permissions. Maybe there is data. Maybe it is behind a firewall. Maybe you've not got the right permissions. Step two, maybe you have very little data. See if you can augment the data. You can expand the data. I remember a use case where we had a few students who were looking at X-ray pictures of mammograms. So they were looking at mammograms, and mammograms, we had only about 10,000 of them. And if you had to do deep learning of any good quality, you would need 1 million or so. What we did was we figured out that if you can twist the image a little bit, if you can shear it by 5 degrees, if you can expand it a little bit, any of these variations by 5 degrees, 2 degrees, and so on would give you more data sets. So we actually expanded that 10,000 to 150,000. So that was a way of augmenting data. Another thing that you could do is another case. This was another case. One of my students had a problem where she was looking at cameras within a mall, and she was supposed to look at how does the data of people walking in the mall lead to patterns which can be utilized. But unfortunately, that was a PDPA violation. So she was not allowed to get the camera data. So what we did was we actually simulated data. We went to the mall, looked at the entries, the exits, looked at who were the people who were walking through, for example, to go to the MRT on the other side because it was a shortcut, and simulated realistic data. Sometimes that is also good enough. Another thing that you could do is try publicly available data. There's a wealth of publicly available data in the internet. I've listed a few of them, data.gov. Singapore government has put up quite a bit of public data, but an interesting one on the horizon is Google dataset search. At last count, there were 25 million data sets out there for you to start using. I'm predicting that Google dataset search is going to only grow, and that there's going to be a lot of people who are going to use that for interesting analysis. So that's one problem. But sometimes you have the opposite problem. You have too much data. You have a deluge of data. This is a Hokusai painting where the tsunami actually is taller from this perspective sometimes than Mount Fuji in the background. So if you have too much data, then what you want to do is you want to look at a systematic approach to data. So here's a data pyramid that we talk about in our courses. So we talk about the fact that if you're looking at data and a value chain of data, the ultimate goal or the end objective is to come up with visual output, some kind of a chart, something that visually represents what the insights are. And if that's the ultimate goal, you need to do some analysis before you get there. Before you do that analysis, you need to prepare the data. And before you get there, one secret of data is always dirty. Show me an organization that has clean data, and I will eat this iPad. There is no such concept as clean data. Data is always dirty, and hence you need to spend sometimes up to 50% of your project time in cleaning up that data. And even before you clean the data, you need to collate the data because it is in multiple places. You need to put that together into one place. And you need to collect the data in the first place. The data might be in paper and pen format sometimes. You might want to convert that into electronic format. So you need to look at a systematic approach. But if this cake is too big to eat, if this is a huge pizza that you cannot eat, what do? You cut a slice. Cutting a slice is where you say, okay, let me take just that small problem, just that visual output. And for that visual output, let me look at the analysis, preparation, cleaning, collation, and collection that's required. And if I do that, then I would be able to do something which is a quick win. but you need to look at a balance between a quick win and a long-term scalable approach. Data also comes in multiple formats. So here's where I want to quickly talk about a few data types. The first one I want to do is talk about big data. So the media has got the term big data wrong. Big data is not equal to analytics. Big data is just one kind of data. If you have lots of data in multiple computers and you need to do parallel processing to be able to process all of that at one time, then you have big data. Significant amount of problems can be solved with small data. Small data is not useless. Small data has a lot of power in it. You could have big data diagnostic analysis, small data diagnostic analysis. You could have big data descriptive analytics. You could have small data descriptive analytics, and so on. Another category that I want to talk about is streaming data. When you're talking about streaming data, you're talking about real-time or sometimes near real-time kind of data. And this real-time and near real-time kind of data is where you need special kind of algorithms to be able to handle that. An example of real-time analysis is Google Maps. When you look at Google Maps and you look for, say, place A to place B, I live in Upper East Coast Road, and let's say I'm coming to Heng Mui Keng Terrace, and I search on Google Maps for the route, I will get a route which has blue and red lines on the route, which is the traffic conditions, which is live. It's almost like a real-time dashboard that is being sent to me. So the kind of data processing for streaming data is a different kind of processing than non-streaming data. Another category that I want to distinguish is unstructured versus structured. When you're talking about unstructured data, you're talking about images, text, video, and interesting examples of late called affect data. Affect data is data where you're looking at facial expressions. Let's say you frown or you smile, and you look at the facial expressions and you say somebody's happy or sad. Interesting data sets like that are coming in which are unstructured. How do you deal with unstructured data? Very simple. You take unstructured data, convert it to structured data, and do what you do with structured data. So that extra process of converting unstructured data to structured data is the domain expertise. So unstructured data specialists, video mining specialists would know how to convert unstructured video to structured video, and so on. So I've just talked about 8 different types of data on this slide. 2 into 2 into 2. You have big data, small data, multiplied by streaming data, non-streaming data. So you could have 8 combinations. And for each of these combinations, you need to look at a different kind of data pipeline. You need to have a different kind of processing. Number 7. Once you've done your predictive analytics, you want to move on to prescriptive analytics. The term I prefer for prescriptive analytics is decision engineering. What is decision engineering? Decision engineering is where you want to look at data collection, processing, build a model, and then execute. It's somewhat similar to how your body would process various inputs. Let's say you walk on the street and you find a friend, then your sensors, your eyes first capture that data, send those signals to your brain actually recognizes that it's a friend, sends a signal to your muscle, which is an actuator, and your hand goes up and you say hi. That entire wiring is something that would happen in a human body. But if you had to do it in a company or an organization, you need to do an equivalent, which is data collection and processing, model scoring, and decision execution. This, mind you, is different from the analytics framework. Analytics framework is where you're looking at business understanding, data preparation, and so on, and coming out with an insight. And that insight would be the form of a model which could be deployed. Number 8, let's talk about the tools. And this is often an interesting challenge. Now, sometimes companies just rush to go ahead and pick up as many tools as they can. But the first thing that I want to talk about is that consider the humble Microsoft Excel. Microsoft Excel can do wonders. Especially the recent Microsoft Excel is now so powerful, it can handle quite a bit of data. Not big data yet, but the small data it handles is significantly big enough. Big data might have a different set of tools. You need probably the Hadoop ecosystem or similar such ecosystems. You need tools to do data cleaning. You need R or Python or SQL. These are the top 3 trending in today in terms of software that you need to learn. But you also need software tools to implement your deployment. You need to implement your decision engineering. Sometimes you might want dashboarding tools. You might want a Tableau or a ClickView to be able to do interesting slice and dice and visually represent data. The point is, you want to pick the tools that you need. The idea is not to pick everything, but pick the right tools that are required for you. Let's talk about number 9, recruitment. A significant challenge is in recruitment. When you want to start off an analytics unit, you want to say, okay, who do I recruit? What do I recruit? And I've seen a lot of job descriptions which say, okay, I want someone who can do Hadoop, who can do machine learning, who knows Java, who has AI. Hang on, there's something wrong out here. The HR person has actually looked at all the keywords and stuffed every single keyword into one job description. Now, if that's the case, then you want to be able to look at that company a little more carefully. The point is that companies, just like software, need to specialize in the kind of people they recruit. If I was to look at a software engineer for a recruitment purpose, I would not recruit a software professional. I would recruit a front-end developer or a database administrator or a systems administrator or a security expert. There are flavors of software folks. Similarly, there are flavors of data scientists. Here are some examples. An ideal data scientist is a T-shaped data scientist. Looks at predictive modeling, for example, as one of the skills. As opposed to a data engineer who is somewhere between a data scientist and a software professional. Looks at big data engineering and can implement end-to-end systems. Think of a data engineer like a heavy-duty crane operator, someone who's lifting a lot of data from point A to point B and doing that consistently and building those pipelines. Another interesting example I can talk about is data visualizer. The data storyteller is becoming very important. An ideal data visualizer can create visual magic. And these data visualizers today are becoming increasingly in demand. Consulting companies have started recruiting data visualizers. And these data storytellers, when they can tell a story very well using business language, they are being ushered into the boardrooms where sometimes they have to be able to arbitrate between, say, CXOs who are arguing and then say, okay, so here's data and this is what data says. You also have data-driven domain experts. So when you can combine domain expertise with data, then you would have a solution perspective. An example could be anti-money laundering. There are lots of anti-money laundering data domain experts who can deliver lots of ROI. But that's not enough. It's not just the kinds of data scientists that you need, but you also need people who are more than data scientists or people who are working with these data scientists. You need domain experts. That's very important because we said that it's solving domain problems fundamentally. You need implementation specialists because if you don't implement the insights, then you're not really going anywhere. You need software developers because you need software developers both upstream to extract the data, midstream to be able to process the data, and downstream to be able to implement any of the outputs. So you need all of these kinds of people. Now you need to figure out which of these people is the first that you would recruit. Again, that comes back to following things one by one, figuring out what exactly are your requirements. Here's some bad news about recruitment. There are these threats that we see all the time. People say that robots will replace automatic mundane jobs. AI is going to automate all the intelligence. Current skills will become obsolete. This is a phenomenon that's affecting the entire world. But the point is, while some categories of jobs might become obsolete, new categories will emerge. Somebody has to engage with the AI systems. Somebody has to develop those systems. Somebody has to supervise them. And you're going to have newer business models. So if you've got newer business models, then somebody has to think through what's the business model, what's the business problem, how do you organize the business? So you need to figure out how to exactly build this team. So one of the ways in which you could build a team is undergo formal education. You could look at, or you could convert the folks that you have who have adjacent skills and start picking up skills in data science. At ISS, we have a professional conversion program, which does exactly that. The other way to do it is if you want to look at, if you don't have enough time to be able to devote to your learning journey, you want to be able to self-pace some parts of it. We also have programs like the data literacy program where you could do it on an asynchronous mode online. Let's round it up with number 10. While you might have looked at all the 9 points that we spoke about, while you have set up a good analytics unit, sometimes you might find that you hit a bottleneck. Sometimes you might find that you're going fine and great, but there is a chasm. There is some kind of a deep valley that you need to cross, and there is a problem. What do you do? This is a typical situation that I've seen. And yes, you might want to jump over it like a rabbit, but that's one way of doing it. But the point is that it's about teamwork. Have you heard of the story of the elephant? There were 6 blind people who were looking at the elephant, and each of them saw different parts of the elephant. Somebody looked at the trunk and said it's a snake. Somebody looked at the ear and said it's a fan. Somebody looked at the tusk and said it's a spear. So there were different perspectives. The elephant was looked at by each of the blind men differently. My humble suggestion is that analytics is being looked at exactly the same way in organizations. The business users are looking at it differently. The software professionals are looking at it differently, and the analytics folks are looking at it differently. Just a quick peek into how they look at it differently. When you look at the analytics folks would build a lot of variables quickly so that they can find out the trends, throw a lot of them, and then move on and zone in onto some narrow ones. Which means that they throw away code. They're not about systematic thinking. Whereas the programmer would be horrified at that. He would say, oh, you throw away code? What's wrong with you? The programmer would be like, let me look at it step by step by step. First, give me the entire pseudocode. Tell me step 1 to step 20, what exactly are the series of steps. And then I would go one by one. Unless you give me that, I won't be able to start off. Whereas the data scientist is like, I think while I code. Hey, what's wrong? The point is both are right. Both are looking at it from their own perspective. And if you talk about the business user is, I don't care about whether you use Agile or whether you use Waterfall. I don't care about whether you use CRISP-DM. These are all methodologies, by the way. What I care about is fundamentally the results. Is this delivering ROI? Are you fundamentally giving me a business benefit? So when you're talking to each of these people, make sure you see their perspectives. Make sure you are looking at their part of the picture. Make sure you are catering to what their concerns are. That, to me, is one of the things that you can do in order to be able to get into crossing the chasm. So teamwork is essential. So that's really what I have in terms of slides. And here are a few things, a few social media presences of ours, which you might want to look at. And that's it really from a content perspective. I'd love to take questions and see what you have for me. Okay. I have one question from Derek, which is, how is Python used as a data cleaning tool? So Python can be used as a data cleaning tool because Python, first of all, can be used for multiple things. It's a very versatile tool. It's almost like the Swiss Army knife of software. What you want to do is, for data mining, you want to use only a specific set of tools from Python. And that specific set of tools for Python has its own libraries where you can look at data processing. And using those data processing libraries, you can do a whole lot of data cleaning. We have a few courses in that regard, but the best course that you can do, the best way to learn all of these, very simple, www.youtube.com. Okay, so what is, Jennifer's asking, what's the difference between data analytics and biz analytics? Okay, let me expand that question. A lot of people also ask, what's the difference between analytics and analysis? So first of all, analysis is like a superset. Analytics is probably a subset. When you're looking at analysis, you're looking at analyzing a whole lot of things. And when you're looking at business analysis, you're probably looking at business specific ways of looking at it. When you say analytics, you're talking about a structured process. Step 1, step 2, step 3. How are you looking at what is a sequence or what is a scientific way of looking at the analytics? So that's the difference between analysis and analytics. In terms of business analytics versus data analytics, I'd fundamentally say the term data analytics is something that we need to really look closely at. If we're talking about looking at data quality or specific elements like that, then you can start according some particular objectives. But isn't all data analytics fundamentally towards a certain business? Isn't all data analytics towards a certain objective? So I would say that there should not be such a difference. You should not look at data analytics as a separate stream. Any data analytics is fundamentally towards a business. The reason why a lot of people come up with this distinction or do this distinction is because, remember what I was talking about, the difference or the gap between predictive analytics and moving on to prescriptive analytics. A lot of people stop at predictive analytics. A lot of people stop at the insights they gather. And then they do not move on to the implementation. They do not move on, how do you actually make that be realized? How does the business get the benefit out of it? So unless you have a business perspective to your data analytics, I would say your data analytics is leaving something on the table. Okay, and we have more questions. So we have Muhammad Akbar Ismail who's asking, hi there. Hi, Muhammad. What tools will be used in business analytics? SAS Miner, Power BI. There'll be multiple tools, Muhammad. So it depends on what tool do you want to look at. So if you're looking at specifically, say, dashboarding or looking at descriptive analytics, you might want to look at Power BI as you were suggesting, or Tableau. If you're looking at a lot of data and cleaning up issues with those data exist, then maybe R or Python. Sometimes if you have Microsoft Excel, that's good enough. So I think it depends on what kind of problem you're dealing with. So tools exist for different kinds of problems. Okay, Yen Min Lee is asking, necessary to know Python, R, and SQL, or knowing one of these will be good enough to move towards a path as a data scientist? Good question. One of them is good enough. SQL does a good job of it from a perspective of a data warehousing perspective or a data pipeline perspective. So SQL is pretty good that way. It has its advantages as well. The parts of Python, not the entire Python, parts of Python which is used in data science and are reasonably equivalent. And you could pick one of them. It's not necessary to pick up both of them. And people who do well in one of them will find it easy to pick up the other. So don't worry about that part. Okay, Shirong Tan. I have a master's in mechanical engineering, no Python programming, and I'm looking to move into the data analytics field. What additional skills should I build on, and what would my career progression look like? Fantastic. I think you're absolutely on the right track because you already have an engineering background. So mathematical bent of mind, analytics way of looking at it. So that's very good. So that's tick mark 1. Tick mark 2, you know Python, that's fantastic as well. So you start off, I think, on a good wicket. So what skills do you need to learn? Before that, I'd say what skills you might want to unlearn. So as I said, that there is a difference between looking at programming and looking at analytics. So the way analytics folks look at things is not necessarily like a structured way of looking at a problem. So they would sometimes look at the big picture and start doing iterative work. So that's a bit of an unlearning possibly. But from extra skills, I would say step 1, understand some domain. If you want to get into analytics, you'd want to start with a domain or two. You'd want to get to understand a few elements of that domain. The idea is not to become an expert in that domain, but to start getting a sense of the ROI. What are the business problems? What exactly are the trade-offs in that domain? And then I would think that given your kind of background, you should be able to easily pick up quite a number of the other skills in data mining. So my sense is that your career progression is going to progress well. Maybe it'll start off as a data scientist or a data analyst. You could also consider a data engineer as a starting point. And from there onwards, you'd want to move up in the business value chain. You'd want to start looking at the solution perspective, the end-to-end perspective, and gain more and more from a business overview. Okay, we have a few more. Bernard's asking, does the PCP in data analytics cover all the stuff that you've just covered and presented? Yes, at certain levels of detail. What we also do is sometimes we do contextualization to look at specific organizations and what are the requirements of specific organizations too. The short answer is yes. Okay, I'm a non-techie. I have all my data in Excel, and the question has not been asked after that. So, okay, the next one, what simple tool should I use? So step 1, Excel itself is powerful. There's a whole lot of things that you can do within Excel. You can use Excel to visualize data. You can use Excel to do some kind of dashboarding. You can also use Excel to do a few statistical techniques. You can do regression. You can do Excel to do some charting. So I think begin with Excel. And from there onwards, you can start getting into a few other tools. One of the issues why you want to move beyond Excel to something like an R is good in data processing. R is good in a pipeline of data cleaning. So if I take a data set and give it to Excel and clean it up, and then I take another data set and give it to the same Excel sheet, the Excel sheet might not work. Whereas that might work in an R. If I take a data set, do a cleaning up exercise, and I take another data set and giving it to the same code of R, chances are that R code is likely to process it. So you can create these generic pipelines. So that's an advantage you have. Okay, Adeline is asking, what's the difference between Python and SQL? Python's a larger set of programs which can do quite a number of things. Python's actually very versatile, a Swiss knife, if I may. And SQL sometimes goes in conjunction with Python, where you're looking at a database at the back end. It's not necessarily just SQL as a database, but you also have an SQL language where you look at querying. So SQL is a little more focused on data and is a little more about looking at data processing. Python does not only that, but a little more than that, which is looking at looking at data cleaning, looking at building models, and possibly even building software on top of that. Sugekyo is asking, to be business analyst, we just need to know dashboard kind of software tools, not the cleaning type of tools like Python, etc., right? I would say even before that, so the business analysts are not necessarily the ones who do the dashboard. There's a lot of visual thinking and a lot of ways of looking at how do you build visual outputs in order to become a data visualizer. The business analyst needs to know the business part of the story, and this business analyst as a role is an interesting role. There is such a role in your programming world where you have a separate business analyst and you have a programmer, whereas in the data science world, that does not exist. You don't have a separate business analyst. You're expected to learn the business analysis yourself. You're expected to roll that up and do other stuff along with just business analysis. Okay, we just have 5 more minutes. Let's see how many questions we can answer. Bernard's asking, for people with no programming skills, is it easy to pick up data science course? Yes. R is actually not a programming language. R is actually a business or a 4GL. It's a 4th generation language. It has been built for business guys in mind. So it's far more easier to learn an R than a Java or a C or a C++. So yes. Do you recommend any tools for the startup companies, beginners for data analytics, which is simple? Microsoft Excel, as I was talking about, I think that's the first thing that you should start off with. Okay. Deep Shah, what skills are required for data engineers? Do we need to have experience in ETL, I'm assuming, and data pipeline? Yes, Deep Shah, that's correct. You're talking about ETL, you're talking about data pipeline, and you're talking about that on a large scale. You might be handling big data. Derek is asking, if one is a good business person coupled with an engineering training, which I have domain knowledge and problem recognition skills spread across several related industries, what core soft and hard skills are still needed to be a data visualizer? So apart from understanding business, you want to look at the visual aspects of presenting data. How do you look at different ways of presenting data? What ways would be used in what kind of situations? We actually have a 3-day course called Data Storytelling that's running as we speak, which does exactly the same thing. What's the difference between data analytics program and a BAPA program offered by ISS PCP? I'm assuming when you say data analytics program, you mean the MTech program. And I'm assuming that you're talking about the ISS PCP. The best way to do that is just go to our website. All the details are there. What courses can I pursue at NUS ISS towards becoming a data analyst and a scientist? We have a lot of courses. Go to the website. There's a lot of details. And all of these, interestingly, are stackable. You can actually take these courses and stack them up over a period of time towards your journey to becoming an MTech. Okay. How would you advise someone to develop better data storytelling skills? I think data storytelling is not more about presentation, but more about identifying the patterns, identifying the business issues. And as I was saying, data storytelling is something that's an art and a science in itself. There are quite a number of courses that you could talk about. More specifically, the data storytelling course that I was talking about a little while back. I'm just speeding up, trying to see how many questions I can take. I have 1 minute, 50 seconds to go. Let me see. How does Python and R different? I think I've answered that. I'm going to skip that. Data engineer compared to AI engineer, which to start? So AI is a machine learning perspective. AI is a different way of looking at it, where you're looking at a systems perspective. We do have an AI track and we do have a data science track. Data science is more like a business perspective. Our business perspective is the enterprise business analytics track. So I think it really depends on how you're looking at yourself. Are you looking at a systems developer, or are you looking at how do you build ROI for companies? Okay. For PCP, what are the companies participating? There are quite a number of them. Write into us and we'll get back to you. Is data science one of the SG United Skills programs? Yes. Okay, so what are the industries that have embraced data analytics? How about those industries that are hesitant and slow in implementing this? There are quite a number of industries. I spoke about 6 of them. In fact, today there is no industry which has gone in. If you're talking about something that was a slow starter, insurance is an example that a few years ago was very slow off the blocks, but today is rapidly addressing it. And we have the last question. Lots of companies have high expectation of all-rounders. How do data domain experts who are less techie can position themselves? You need to position yourself because on the domain front, that is the key. So domain is the one single differentiator that can position you. And we have 6 seconds to go. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed the session.